Thank you all for being with us this afternoon. My name is Donna Brzezinski. I'm the provost of Pasco Hernando State College's campus here in Brooksville. And we have a number of our faculty and staff here. So if you happen to work for the college, whatever campus you work for, would you please stand up? If you're a student here at PHSC, would you please stand up as well? Yay. Let's give our students a little bit of a If you're attending because you're a resource fair participant and collaborating with us. Oh, well, what happened to the mic's on? Can you hear me okay? About the mic? Can you hear me better now? Yeah. Sorry about that. When you speak, you can't hear that you're not speaking into the mic. If you work and are volunteering today as a resource from one of our partners, would you please stand up because we appreciate you very much. Thank you for being with us. And our local community service organizations, we have a number of you here. Please stand up with us as well. And I'd like to introduce Kevin Curtis, the man behind the screen. He thinks he's the Wizard of Oz. I think he is too. Kevin is here with us from our marketing and social media area, and you'll see him quite a bit. He may come up and ask if he can do a little reporting with you. All right, so officially, it is my pleasure to welcome everyone to Pasco Hernando State College's North Campus and to our Women's History Month event. This is our 6th annual event, and I know some of you have been here with us for those 6 years. Pat Crowley, where are you? I just saw you. Pat Crowley from the Chamber of Commerce was on our panel one year. So this event has been varied over the years. We've had panels of discussion. We have had faculty speaking. One year we had a discussion of the Hidden Figures movie and how women's history changed because of that era. And this year and last year we had a resource fair, which seemed to work really well because so many people came in and didn't know some of the resources that were here. And also we found that the people that were attending as resource presenters, our vendor tables, got to know each other and make some good connections. So we're very pleased that you all are here. Thank you for being here with us. Today's event is one that we're very pleased to be able to present to you. It will feature our guest speaker, Serena Fazan, and many of you will know her name from ABC Action News. I'm not going to read her entire biography. It is lengthy, and it is really wonderful. And she's going to address many of the items that are in her biography. But I do want to talk about a couple of things. First of all, she is an award-winning television anchor and reporter. She has 24 years of industry experience. And when you meet her, you'll say she must have started when she was 4 years old. She's currently working on offering commentary on the first ever international collaboration between CNN and Sky News. And she's going to talk to you a little bit about that. We asked her to come and talk with us today because the topic that's a national topic for Women's History Month is called Visionary Women, Champions of Peace and Violence. And she has done many, many different shows, articles, a lot of publicity for focusing on peace and nonviolence because of issues that have been violent. So we welcome Serena Fazan to the stage, and we appreciate you being here with us.
Thank you so much, everyone, for having me. I can't even tell you how humbled and honored I am to be here. Oftentimes, people will prepare a speech, but I decided I think we should do this more as a conversation. And maybe I can tell you a bit about my life, how I got to this point, and I would love to answer any questions. I have had a fascinating career, but I wanted to ask first, before we even get started, how many of you in this room knew what they wanted to be as a young child? How old were you, honey? Like four, right? A lot of you, or like sometimes people go, yeah, I've had many interns who didn't know once they started the college process, but I've always known. I've known since I was 3 years old that I wanted to be a broadcast journalist. And I didn't even know how to speak English. English is actually my 5th language. And so I had a speech impediment. I was in speech therapy for years and years and years. I still stutter and stammer here and there, but I think, I'm crossing my fingers, I've kind of nailed it down to speak English, but it took me a long time. I just started a blog, serenafazan.com, and it's called, the blog is Indian Trailblazer. Many people have asked me to write about my life story, but my story really starts with my dad. And I was sharing this story with Donna yesterday, and it goes to Champions of Peace and Nonviolence. And many, many people do not know this story, so you will be the first to hear it. My father, to me, is a true, true hero. But his history, again, is amazing. My grandfather, so my father's dad, was best friends with Mahatma Gandhi, the Mahatma Gandhi.
Wow.
So when I was growing up, I'll never forget this. I was maybe 9 years old, and producers, maybe 7, producers came to my house for the movie, Gandhi. I'd never seen my dad cry, I had never seen him emotional, and they asked my father, they wanted to ask him questions about his dad. My father politely declined. We were living in Olympia, Washington at the time. My father was the comptroller of the state. He worked for Dixie Lee Ray, who was the first female governor of that state. I tell you this because I envisioned my dad as, and still do, as someone, I looked up to, never saw him, he never raised his voice, was always so calm, cool, and collected, until that day when I actually saw him break down. I would learn later that his father, I did know that my dad's father died when he was only 14 years old. He died a week after Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated. Mahatma Gandhi and my grandfather, again, were very, very close friends. They both went to school together in England. My grandfather, though, had a bit of a fiery temper. Mahatma Gandhi, as we all know, his whole platform was peace. At the time, they were trying to free India from English rule. And Gandhi told my grandfather that the only way that they were going to do this was through peace. So he took the lead role, even though both men were very, very closely involved and worked together. After Gandhi was assassinated, my grandfather died within a week, as I mentioned, in front of my dad. He had a heart attack because of all the pressure. The 2 men that were their predecessors, I guess you could call them, took over. And I'll try to explain this as clearly and succinctly as I can. Gandhi was Hindu, my grandfather was Muslim, but they never allowed religion to get in the way of their friendship and their mission to free India from rule. Their successors were not, they did not feel the same way. So that's what really sparked the Civil War in India. So if you were a student in India, my grandfather and Mahatma Gandhi are in every single history book imaginable. I mean, you grow up learning about them, you learn about the war, so on and so forth. Coming back to me at the age of 7 or 8, when those producers came to the door, I had no idea. Like, I knew my grandfather was an amazing man. I knew, sadly, my grandfather died when my dad was only 14 years old. But that is also the day that I learned why my father was so calm, never raised his voice, never showed any type of violence, and always took that peaceful approach. It's because of what he learned as a child. And he also learned that the only way to accomplish anything in life is by doing it in a peaceful manner. And I hope that story makes sense to you, because that's what's guided me throughout my entire life. I grew up very close to my family, but I had an arranged marriage. my entire life, you know, as I mentioned, since I was 3 years old, I wanted to be a broadcast journalist. I don't blame my parents for this whatsoever, and I talk about it in my blog. It's for the first time in my life that I'm beginning to talk about what happened to me. My parents arranged my marriage. I loved them very much, but I decided that I couldn't go through with the arranged marriage because I wanted to go to college. So I left home at the age of 18, and my parents didn't talk to me again for a very, very long time. I was disgraced from the community. I mean, from everybody I knew, everybody I loved. Again, I do not mean to speak any ill will against my family. We have reunited since, because my parents were doing what they felt was right. This goes back though to peace and nonviolence, because there are many ways I could have handled it. I could have left, and I could have been, I did it silently and quietly and peacefully, and just tried to pursue my career as a broadcast journalist. And it took me a little longer. I worked 4 jobs to get through college, but I survived it, and I did manage to get a job, and I started in the Quad Cities, which is Iowa and Illinois. It's right, Iowa and Illinois. I went to New Orleans, and here's an interesting fact. I was brought into New Orleans to replace Hoda Kotb, who many probably know is on the Today Show. But at the time, she was an anchor in New Orleans. And because of her similar background that I had, they brought me in. She since went on to the Today Show. I would have stayed in New Orleans, but it didn't fit. For me, it didn't seem to fit. So I took the job here in Tampa, and Tampa's my home. I love Tampa. I have never felt such peace. It's hard to explain. I feel like the Tampa Bay market and the community is my home. So I started working at Action News 18 years ago, and it's very interesting because for someone who really does believe in nonviolence and taking a peaceful approach, with my father and my grandfather as an example, I have covered the most violent stories that you can possibly imagine. And that's why I said to Donna, rather than going through my bio, I thought I would go through it myself. Donna did mention the show that I'm currently on. It's called Vengeance, Killer Lovers. And the show focuses on, I know it's a crazy name, but the show focuses on the 40 most fascinating criminal cases around the world. They tapped me to do the stories here in the Bay Area because of my experience and my reputation for landing exclusive interviews. But since I was interviewed, now they're using me to commentate on stories that didn't necessarily happen in the Bay Area, but all over. And so far there's been 2 episodes, and it's on Sunday night on HLN. But that being said, people in the newsroom would always say to me, how could you possibly do all of these heart-wrenching, emotional stories when it really goes against every fiber of my being and who I am? But I guess as a journalist, you tackle what's given to you. And some of the stories, I know a lot of you might remember, some of you are too young to remember, but I don't even know, I guess what, I even have to pause and even think about why I gravitate towards these type of stories. And I think maybe it's because I myself try to understand why there has to be so much violence in the world. Like, why in the world do people resort to such violence when it can honestly be resolved through peace? I've just never understood it. So maybe that is why I gravitate towards these type of stories. Like, I want to get some answers, and part of me wanting to get answers is to also get answers for the community, because I'm so humbled to have worked as a broadcast journalist and still work as a broadcast journalist. And I feel that Someone just asked me once, what does that exactly mean to you? What does that image mean to you? To me, it means it's not working 40 hours a week. I feel like it's 24/7. So wherever I go, when someone asks me about a story I did or how I feel about that story, and when I mean anybody, I mean all of you, I feel that's my duty as a journalist, and that's my duty to get answers. And that is one of the reasons why I focused on some of these really high-profile cases, because they rattle the community so much that I wanted to provide answers for the mothers, the fathers, the sisters, for aunts, uncles, grandparents, on why this could possibly happen. And one of the most troubling stories that still haunts me to this day, and people ask me about this too, they always say, do these stories get to you? Do you forget about them? Absolutely not. They still give me nightmares. I think about them all the time. I can't help it, and I lose sleep over it. But I feel like it's my obligation again as a journalist to share these stories. So I don't know if many of you remember Julie Schenecker. Do you guys remember who she is? She's the woman who killed her 2 kids. There were many intriguing aspects about that case. She was a Russian linguist, so she's brilliant. She was married to a colonel. They lived in a very nice home with 2 children. And I'm going to share something too very personal, so if I stutter, I'm sorry. But I have one child who is the absolute love of my life. During that time, though, I really wanted another one, and for personal reasons, it didn't happen. So I could not myself deal with the fact, like, how could a woman who has these 2 beautiful kids, 2 beautiful children, kill them? And then, I mean, who would do that anyway? But I just couldn't get my mind wrapped around it. And plus, if you remember the videos of her, and for those who don't know, when she was walked out, she was wrapped up in a straitjacket and she was shaking. So a lot of people thought, clearly she was insane. Well, I wrote to her every single month for 4 years. And I wrote to her asking her, please give us your side of the story. Now, many people might think, why would we want to hear her side of the story? But I think many people did want to hear her side of the story. What happened? I mean, is she truly insane? Or is she a brilliant mind? And why would she do something like that? So after 4 years, she granted me the interview. It's also the only interview in the entire nation of a woman that's killed her kids. We have heard from women who have killed their kids, but only in the courtroom. She's the only one that's actually sat down with a reporter to talk about her experience. And I have to tell you, I consider myself fairly intelligent, but to this day I'm so haunted because I don't know if she was telling me the truth, that she was insane, that something and if you go back, you can watch the video on YouTube. She said that she saw the souls of her 2 kids leave their bodies, and she was protecting them, and that's why she did it. She had to remove them from society. To this day, as I mentioned, I do not know if she really felt that, or if she was manipulating me. But it's one of the most haunting stories. But one of the reasons why I also did that story was because, speaking of peace and nonviolence, I said, I will share your story. I said, but I also want to do a second part talking about mental illness, and about if you know someone who suffers from mental illness, that we need to get them help so perhaps this does not happen again. The story did win an Emmy Award and numerous other ones for that. And I don't say that because, oh great, it won an award. That's not what it's about. I'm proud of that because I think it raised mental awareness and, you know, and stopping things before it becomes so violent. After that story ran, I received so many emails at work, so many phone calls, and to this day even. And even her husband, Colonel Parker Schenecker, asked for a private meeting with me to thank me for getting that story out there and talking about the mental illness angle. That if you know someone that might be struggling with something, it's better to say something than not say something at all. So I would say that's probably the story that's haunted me the most, or one of the stories that's haunted me the most in my entire career. The other one I want to talk about, and there's quite a few, but the other one that was so violent, and you know, so oftentimes as journalists we know more than we can share with you. Not that we don't want to share it with you, but TV is limited. You know, TV stories are 2 minutes, 6 minutes long. It depends on the format. A lot of you are too young. Many people might remember the Bloomingdale rape victim story. If you know, I don't know if you remember that. She was this, again, I mean, I think about this girl every single day. She was 18 years old, born to Vietnamese parents, grew up in a more strict background, so I could relate to that, you know, growing up with Asian parents. She was dropping off a library book, and her parents had finally said to her that she could go on a beach vacation with her girlfriends before she went off to college. So it was the first time she was ever allowed to do that. She's such a great kid though. She wanted to drop off the library book the night before they left. All her girlfriends said to her, why just not drop off the library book in the morning? Why drop it off the night before? Gives me goosebumps because that decision changed everything. She dropped off her library book, and that's when a man by the name, not even a man, a teenager, by the name of Kendrick Morris attacked her. He brutally beat her, sexually assaulted her. Here's a young girl who never even held hands with a boy prior to this happening. She, to this day, has never recovered from those injuries. Kendrick Morris we found out later that he had actually done the same thing, not beaten this woman so severely, but had raped and sexually assaulted and beaten an elderly woman just a few months before. He was only a teenager. But what Hillsborough County deputies and detectives told me on the scene, and again, these are many things, many details that we can't share in our news stories, but this haunted me and still does. Do you know, here he is, they catch him in the woods, he's done this to this poor girl, and the very first thing he says to the detectives, do you think my mom will come and see me when they bring me to jail? The very first thing. And I think that points back to how your upbringing, you know, how the love of parents, right? And how important it can be, and what you see in your life, and how that develops you, and you know, the what you follow. His mom did not come to see him in jail because she herself was in jail for drugs and alcohol. The rape victim, though, I became very close to their family. I did a lot of exclusive interviews with the family and, you know, her close friends. But what bothered me so much, here's this, you know, it touched the community a lot too, because this truly could have been your sister, your niece, you know, your granddaughter. What astounded me though was this happens to this poor girl, and they deny her care. Health insurance was denied. But yet Kendrick Morris was sitting in jail and had the best doctors, the best dentist, and this poor girl, she couldn't get health care. So I called the governor, Charlie Crist at the time, called Bill Nelson, U.S. Senator. I started to get the community together to do fundraisers for her. And it wasn't me to get the fundraisers going. I just publicized them because so many people were so upset about what was happening. But I did engage lawmakers, and they changed it. They provided her health care. And to this day, her health care continues. And to this day, fundraisers are also, she has many people helping her. I don't talk to the family that much anymore, and I'm also sharing this with you today. And you know, when I get like upset or nervous, I have a tendency to stutter or stammer, but because it hurt me so much. It's so painful. So to see their faces, and I know that I should probably check in more with them. I try to, but I feel like you can use peace and nonviolence to combat something that was so violent and change this person's life. I'm a journalist, and I have that access to lawmakers and to the governor. But I think we can all make a difference. If we see something, and if we see that we can help somebody, right? It's so much easier to be kind than it is to be cruel, because we don't know what's going on in someone's life. Say you go to the CVS pharmacy, and the woman behind the register is having a bad day. We don't know what's going on in her life, you know? We honestly don't know. So I've always believed that even when I've had to interview some of the most horrific people, that you still need to approach it with calmness and kindness, and hear whoever it is out. Now, you don't have to agree with them, right? And you may be disgusted, but that Kendrick Morris story, I mean, I have to tell you, I mean, do I pity him at all? Not at all. But it did make me sad after I heard about the first person he wanted to see was his mom, and he never got a chance to see his mom. I think it just goes to show that we never know what's going on in someone's life. There are so many other, like here, I can just go through, for instance, do you guys remember the hiccup girl? Do you remember she would hiccup all the time? It made international news. So here she is, a 15-year-old, she hiccups all the time. She's on all these national and international shows of doctors trying to find out why. She gets all this public sympathy. And then she falls in with the wrong crowd, and from an innocent teenager, she becomes a convicted killer. She's sitting in prison for 25 years for orchestrating the death of a man. It's just, I point that out to you too, because it's so crazy how things can just change, you know? Like, she had the world rooting for her, and now what happened to her? You know, what happened that she fell in with the wrong group? And I talk about that story a lot too, because they interviewed me for a book that's coming out on her case. I'm trying to look at my bio to talk to you guys a little bit more about some of the cases that affected me the most. The another one too is the Eisenberg case. I'm sure, are you guys familiar with the Sabrina Eisenberg case? I didn't live here at the time when she vanished, but it's still one of the biggest. It's like John Benet Ramsey, it's one of the biggest mysteries. But the Eisenbergs actually invited me into their home in Baltimore when they moved out of the Bay Area and they moved to Baltimore because they wanted to escape everything that was happening here. How did I get on that topic? I guess I'm just taking a look at this list and thinking, wow, I did that story, and wow, I did that story. And it's not that I've forgotten, it's just that, and I know I'm probably not making too much sense. I'm sorry. I just say, let me be honest and truthful. Whenever I talk about some of these stories that are the hardest, like the Julie Schenker story or the Bloomingdale rape victim story, they do affect me, and I can't help it. Like, I start thinking about those families, and I start, recalling the way, the tears in their eyes, and the way that they looked, and how one moment in time changed their life. And I'm such a strong believer in, we can't prevent things from happening sometimes. Like that young girl at the library had no idea that night that she would drop off the book, that the decision she made to drop off the book the day before rather than that morning would alter her life forever. Calix and Bo, the two children that were killed at the hands of their mom, they had no idea that when she picked them up from school that day, that would be their last day on earth, right? So we never know what can happen. There's been many, many stories too that I've covered, not to the, these are obviously, if you take a look at my bio, you'll see some of the biggest stories I've covered. But on a daily basis as a journalist, there were many, many days and many, many stories where I would go and talk to families that their loved one was in a car accident, or a van flipped and the entire family perished, or there was a robbery and they were the victims of a robbery. You just never ever know what can happen in life. And every day is such a treasure. And I would tell my interns that all the time too, that, even though things may appear tough and really hard, I mean, when I ran away from home when I was 18 years old, believe me, an 18-year-old out on their own, it's a dangerous road. And trauma happened. And maybe one day I'll be able to express more of that as I continue to write my blog. But there are many, many times that I could have given up and not forged on. But I did forge on. And there's two ways you can handle that. You can be angry and you can bottle up that anger. And I think that anger comes out in many, many ways. That anger comes out in the way you might treat people. That anger may come out in a way that you handle a job interview. That anger comes out in a way that you think the world is against you and it doesn't draw the right people to you. Or you can embrace it and think, this is my life. These are the challenges that I have to face, and I have to face them, and I have to embrace what I face. When I ran away from home at 18, no one in a million years thought I would make it and be a broadcast journalist. I mean, I didn't have a home to go to. There were many nights that I didn't eat. I had no food. If you look into my closet right now, people walk into my closet and they're like, wow, you have a lot of shoes. Well, truthfully, the reason why I have a lot of shoes is because I remember standing on the L stop in Chicago trying to go to school, and the bottom of my feet, the pad, like these shoes, I guess, this right here was not there, and I got frostbite. So that's why I have this worry about shoes. Like I always have to have shoes. And I guess, and I can't believe I'm sharing these stories because many of these I have not told yet. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, even if you think the world is against you, or even if you feel like there's no way I can get through this, or even if you feel people have done you wrong and it's not right and it's not fair, I think the truth will eventually prevail. But you can't allow it. You can't allow it to take away from you, and take away from what you believe. And if you embrace kindness, and you embrace love, and you try to do the best that you can every single day, you will impact someone's life, and you will come out ahead. I hope that makes sense. Any questions? Do you guys want me to keep going? I shared a lot of secrets today.
I just have a question in regards to your perspective with the Me Too movement, especially in the newsroom.
Yes.
In your industry, because there are a lot of news stories that came about, very high profile individuals that, had issues that came to light. And so I thought, it'd be interesting to hear your perspective about that, and women in leadership roles in the newsroom now.
Mm-hmm.
And is that opening up more, or, how's it been in your experience?
That is such a great question, because that's what everybody is talking about, and everybody is talking about the Me Too movement. I think the Me Too movement, it has opened up a platform. I think, and I get so many perspectives, whether it's from the, whether it's when I go to the grocery store, or it's when I get my cup of coffee. Some people think the Me Too movement has gone too far, quite frankly. But truthfully, maybe it needed to go too far to open up the doors, so women would not be afraid, and women would not be afraid to talk about being intimidated, and talk about what has happened to them in the workplace. I think it's opened up a conversation. I think it's helped women not be so afraid to come forward. Now, that being said too, I think we need to be cognizant from a newsroom perspective. I think we do need to be cognizant of putting things out there before we vet them as journalists. Whether it's a male, female, whoever it is, a lot of times, old school journalism is you need to have sources that can back up the claims of somebody. And so sometimes I think some news organizations are too quick to put something on the air before they vet things out. And social media has allowed that to happen, because things are so immediate. And once it's on social media, you can't take it down. Like, I might post something on my page, on my Facebook page. I might take it down immediately. But by the time I've taken it down, someone may have reposted it, someone may have shared it, it goes viral. So I think news organizations do need to be very cognizant of taking a look at the allegations, and before putting them out there, making sure that all the for lack of a better term, the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed. But also along those lines, I think it was needed. I think it was needed for women, especially, to be able to come forward, to not be afraid, to be able to speak, and hopefully for many that they did receive justice in the end. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was curious too, in terms of leadership roles in the industry though, that are open. Are they open to women as much? Now more now. Because has it been sort of a good old boys network in the high profile industries?
I think
networks?
that's another. So the question was, has it also opened up for women? Yes, absolutely. And I think, especially from a news anchor's perspective, we've seen this grow through the years. And it is thanks to the Barbara Walters, the Diane Sawyers, the Oprah Winfreys of the world, who we've been able to watch women age gracefully. And we've been able to instead of, and I don't know, because, you know, a lot of people ask me about this as well. It seems that a lot of stations seem to be going younger, and I know there's a lot of people are shaking their heads at this point. Now, I am an anchor. I've always wanted to be an anchor, you know, as we know, since I was, you know, 3. For me personally, I want to get my news, whether it's a male or a female, who has experience in the field, who has actually, I've had the privilege of interviewing President Barack Obama, President George Bush, Hillary Clinton, President Clinton. I feel like when I deliver breaking news, or when I tell the public so and so is happening on a local level, I can call up Sheriff Conister, I can call up Sheriff Naco, I can call up Sheriff Gualtieri, and they're going to take my call. And they're not going to take my call because, oh gosh, you're Serena Fazan. It's because of the years of experience I built, the trust that I've gotten from the community. So coming back to that, I think it has opened it up, but you have to take a look at the employer as well. And I think some employers, you know, there could be that mentality still. I mean, in a perfect world, you would hope that employers would take a look at years of experience and what that person can bring to the table, rather than the view perhaps of one person. I still think it's a battle that we have to get through. But I do have to laugh, because when we were just talking about younger and younger, I've been getting that a lot. Like, a lot of people have been asking me that in the community. Our news stations gravitating towards that. I'm clearly not in management, so I can't answer that question. But I can tell you the networks that seem to be doing the best seem to have the veteran journalists and anchors, the people that you can trust, that you can turn to, that you've seen for years. And I'm not even talking on a local scope. I'm talking on the national scope, as well. And that's just my humble opinion on it. I know when I go back to Chicago, where I went to college, a lot of the anchors that I grew up with are still on the air. And I appreciate it, you know? I mean, I think, wow, I remember when Kathy Brock is an anchor that used to work in Chicago, and she retired a few years back. But to be able to watch her and watch all those years, and I don't know, it gave me more respect for the station, that they, you know, allow that, and the public. That makes sense. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I just wanted to say, I think it's great, and I do see the movement that we are moving more towards, let's talk about mental health, let's talk about what's possibly wrong. The Me Too movement, same story. It's making people feel less lonely, more able to talk to one another about the stuff that we need to talk about. So I hope this is the route, this seems to be the path that we're going on, to talk about how people are hurt, why they're hurt, what hurt them, to maybe prevent others from being hurt. I'm hopeful that that's the route we're going, because we need to talk about this stuff. We don't want to hear the bad stories. We all hate hearing the deaths of the kids, but it's important to know how it got them there. So I hope that that's the route that we're on, and I'm thankful for people like you who bring that to the forefront and introduce us, I guess, to those pains and try to intervene before it's too late.
No, thank you so much, because you pointed out something that I meant to say and I didn't say. with all the stories that I've ever done, and all the people I've ever talked to, and whenever there's been such a tragic story, I have always said to them, if we can prevent this from happening just to one other person, then maybe sharing that pain and sharing what you went through, not that it takes away from what happened, but maybe it could help save a life. And maybe it could help save someone else. And I honestly believe with the rape victim story, a lot of people started talking about that. The Julie Schenecker story, a lot of people, again, reached out to me and said that it gave them either the courage to go and get help, or gave them the courage to talk to a family member to say, hey, I think you might need to get some help. And those are just two stories. You know, as I said, those are some of the bigger ones. But every single day, and every single day that I did a story, or I, you know, was anchoring on the desk, I always try to make a difference for the good. And you certainly don't have to be a broadcast journalist to do that. You could be anybody, you know. But we can all do it. We can all do it, and we just do it through our actions and how we treat people. And the more positive you are as a person, that's going to project out, I feel, and the more positive energy you're going to bring back and make the community a better place, period. So, any more questions?
Please join me in giving our guest speaker, Serena Fazan, a really nice